Today's presentation is about getting the most out of Elementor, and I do hope that you will find useful tips for content creators, designers, developers. There's something for everyone, but I do think there is a broader picture of how to approach an efficient website build, and I think maybe some principles that we could take away regardless of the tool. But I am excited to talk about Elementor. My name's Brian Erickson. I'm in charge mostly of web building and web implementation at Grizzly. I have a design background, started in identity work, branding, kind of morphed into a web designer, and have done a lot with SEO, content marketing, and I have been an interactive art director in charge of many websites at the same time. So that's what got me interested in better ways to build websites and also to take care of them. Grizzly, we're just a small, I guess the word would be boutique agency. It's started by my brother and I. There's just a handful of us, and we are a very high touch agency working with a limited number of clients, and we help them with web strategy, web building, website care, and hosting. Tend to work with mid-sized organizations and operate sort of as an extension of their marketing team, or oftentimes we'll do white label building work for agencies because both of those groups oftentimes have a need for senior level help, but maybe can't afford full-time help. So we'll come in on a sort of retainer basis or project basis and help out. We've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. So today's talk, we're going to cover 5 pieces here. We're going to talk a little, just briefly, about what Elementor is, in case anyone doesn't know. And then I've got tips for content creators, designers, and developers, like I said, and then a little bit about the future of Elementor, potentially. Okay, so first things first. Before we jump right into what Elementor is, I wanted us to frame this whole discussion as like from a zoomed out view. So I want to consider when we think about our websites, especially if we're working for an organization or business with multiple sites, multiple employees, stakeholders, etc. Websites, they're more than just one-off ads, even though sometimes we treat them that way or we build them like an afterthought. I've often heard marketing managers will come to me and say, I need a website. Well, really, do you need a website or what are your goals? So really, you need to sell more books, right? Or whatever the goal is. It's usually not just to have a website. But when we build websites, especially multiple websites, I like to think about them in a little different way. So in the past, a lot of business used to be done on what we call Main Street, right? The downtown of a city. If you had a small business or business, you would have a building and employees and inventory, and over time would certainly develop systems and processes for cleaning the store, for restocking it, but also just keeping the facade up and trying to get people to want to come in. And so there would be processes and ongoing thought and investment in taking care of this. Well, now a lot of those Main Street businesses have really moved online, right? We don't have a brick and mortar store. So when we're representing our products and services and offerings, we're doing it online with our websites. So the websites have effectively become our businesses online. And are we treating them similarly, or are we treating them in too much of an ad hoc manner? Similarly, websites, if you have multiple, could be thought of franchises. What consistency do we have in place across our websites for our designers, our developers, content creators? Can our content creators expect that their experience editing one website will be very similar on the next, or is it just this big mix of kind of random tools, and it can become very frustrating, hard to use, which leads into the idea of governance, right? What kind of consistency can we create for our websites, for our teams, right? On a team, how do we create workflows if our websites are kind of like the Wild West? And then finally, sustainability. How do we take care of them and update them consistently? I think this broader way of thinking is a good way to be thinking about Elementor and WordPress or any tool set really when building websites. So as we look through some of these ideas, a lot of what I'm showing you is with this type of problem solving in mind, building websites that are better, that try to account for these types of considerations. So firstly, we're just going to talk about Elementor. Elementor runs on WordPress. So what's the difference? WordPress is a free software. It's called an open source software. It originally, when it started, it mostly let people do blogging, right? Like I could get a WordPress site and I could write articles and put them on the internet. But over time, it has morphed into one of the most popular tools online for building websites, and it's had quite a large market share of websites for some time online. I I don't know if this is the numbers may have gone down recently a bit, but at one point, 60% of all content management websites were powered by WordPress. Now, WordPress, like I said, it's grown over time. Now you can do more. You can build pages, you can do articles, you can add functionality to it with plugins. For example, like calendars would be a good example of a functionality that can be added to a WordPress site by installing a plugin. But there's many other things that can be added. However, WordPress and Elementor are not the same thing. So I've heard people say that they don't like WordPress. Uh, that's that's a broad statement because that could mean many things. It could mean that their WordPress site was built poorly and they had a terrible experience editing it, or it could mean that they don't like the WordPress page editing experience, but they don't mind writing articles on it. I don't know for sure, right? But Elementor comes in and solves a lot of the pain points around using the WordPress software, even for developers, because what it does is it sits on top of WordPress and it allows people to build their website using a visual drag and drop style builder, which we're going to look at here briefly. But it even allows for the templating of things like the main menu, the footer, blog posts, all that to be built with a visual editor that's much more like a design program, like, say, Adobe Illustrator or Figma. So Elementor has really changed how people can build on WordPress. It's much more intuitive and accessible. It's quite fun, and they have a large market share of the WordPress market. Some of the benefits of going with WordPress and Elementor, uh, once you figure out how to use them effectively, they should save some time and cost over, say, custom development, um, because they are supported by large teams. So there's millions of dollars being invested into these products, um, and that investment saves us cost and time, right? So I don't have to remember every couple of weeks to go see if something I custom coded has a security flaw that I need to update. I've seen this before. A really nice custom build happens where somebody builds a website. They don't use WordPress necessarily, and it's nice. But then that person leaves, um, and then nobody else at an organization knows how to update the site. Um, so that gets actually into my third point here, which is reducing risk and obscurity. If you have a site that's very custom, but it's not very well understood, it creates obscurity. And if that person leaves, that creates risk. And additionally, code can get old fast, right? So going back to saving time and costs, um, WordPress and Elementor, they're staying on top of things, issuing updates consistently. So it's nice to use these tools from that perspective because they're investing money we don't have to invest, keeping an eye on security, and then those updates come through to our sites. We can also empower teams because, as you'll see here with Elementor, marketers and content creators can get a lot done that they couldn't do in the past, as well as designers who maybe aren't necessarily comfortable with code, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. They don't necessarily have to be for a large portion of these sites. So it can create a tool set that an entire team of developers, designers, and marketers can all use together successfully. And in the end, it should help us build better, more effective websites. So there's a rough overview of those. But let's just jump in. So if you've been using Elementor or you're thinking about it, I just want to give a live demo of what you can do as a content creator. So this could be interesting to a designer, developer. You'll see some overlap in these three buckets, but let's just get going. There's 6 things I want to talk about for content creators today. And if you, let's see, just a moment. Okay, so let's look at the first one, which is copy and paste. Now, that sounds quite boring. So what I've done here is I've made just a dummy page I put together for this presentation using Elementor. So as we scroll the page, you'll see there's various elements on the page. There's not really a logic to things like some of these moving pieces. I just want to be able to demonstrate some capabilities here. So here's a dummy page I put together, and in the back end, this is what the editing experience looks like. So this is actually Elementor in action. And you can see I can hover over different elements and I can click on them, and then over here on the left there's a sidebar where I can make changes, or I could actually start typing right here. I could also go and manipulate the styles. But what I wanted to talk about, the first tip, is copying and pasting. And there's a few things you can do in Elementor with copying and pasting, which are quite powerful. So number one, let's try this out. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate this heading. And let's say I'm working on it and I decide, you know what, I'd like this one to be that kind of coral reddish color. I'm gonna change the typeface to something else, and I'm gonna change the size, right? So I make some style changes. Great, but let's say I have a bunch of other headings on that page that I would like to have the same style. It would be kind of a hassle, especially if I style it for desktop, tablet, and mobile, to then have to go update all of them the same way. So Elementor supports a right-click, copy, and then what's interesting is I have two options. I can right-click somewhere else and paste, and it will actually paste the whole element. I'm going to delete that. Or I can right-click and I can paste the style. And look at that. Just like that, that style is transferred over. Very handy. So that's pasting the style is something a lot of people don't know you can do. So there's one really neat thing you can do, pasting the styles. But copying and pasting content isn't limited to one item at a time. For example, I could copy this entire section and then say come down here and then paste it. And now my whole section is down here. Another option would be I can actually right click over a column and I can, similar to copy and paste, I can duplicate just like that. Delete. So something good to know about. And then as well, you can go from page to page. So if I opened another page, I could actually copy an element like this image, copy, go to another page, paste it in, keep going. And it is possible, if you scroll down to the bottom of an Elementor page, if you right click in this dotted area, you can copy all content. So I can copy everything from this page, go to a new page, right click in this dotted area and paste the entire page contents. I can also delete all of the contents. So that's the first tip, is copy and paste, and that leads right into multi-select. So let's say like with this logo, let's pretend I decided that logo is too small. So I go to style, I'm gonna up the width, right? Okay, but now I wish my others were the same. So I'm gonna copy it. But then check this out. I can actually multi-select. On the Mac, it's Command. I can't remember or I could be wrong. What is it? Give me a moment. Yeah, it's Command click. So I'm holding down Command. So I've now selected three. I can right click, hit Paste Style, and I just applied the style to three items at once. On the PC, it might be Control. So that's another great thing about the copy and paste features. You can do multi-select. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show content creators is something called Navigator. You may have noticed it when I first opened the page. Down here, there's an icon. If I click it, it brings up a layer structure similar to a design program. Another way, if it's closed, is I can right-click on the page and select Navigator. And so what we'll see here is I have these sections. I can actually open or close all of them with this icon. So they correspond to the sections on the page or containers. So hero, for example, is this first one. And then you can see logos. And as I'm clicking on them, it's actually selecting that element on the page. So if I were to click on this text spinner text one, it's going to scroll me right down to it. And so this is an area with a text element that animates on scroll and gets a little bigger. Well, I was able to select that from here. And what's neat is this is interactive as well. So I could actually drag this and reorder my page from the Navigator. That I find to be very handy for navigating around a page. We can also tab these open, and I can click on individual items. Like, for example, that heading. Well, what if I wanted it, I don't know why, well, this icon, maybe I'd want it above my heading. I can actually drag it up there, and there it goes, just from the Navigator. Another great tip, and I do believe you can right click and copy and right click and paste style, etc., and duplicate right inside of Navigator. I love to do this. And what we do is we name our section. So if I were to add a new section down here, let's say I wanted a 2-column section. By default, it's just called section. And Elementor is about to undergo a large update where these will be called containers. But I can double click this and rename it to something more useful, whatever, whatever that would be. I can just type in a name for that. And so it makes it a lot easier to work on. And instead of this saying section, 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 there's these intuitive titles. It also makes it easier as a team to discuss. So that's we've talked about copy and paste. We talked about Navigator. The next tip is mobile styling. You can actually click and go to view the tablet and the phone right from inside of this editor. So I might decide that, whoa, this font here, it's not working at the mobile size, so I need to go change the size of it under the settings. Any adjustments I make here will actually work on the mobile phone. But it's neat because if I were to say, make this logo bigger, like that, it won't affect the tablet or desktop size. It only affects mobile. And I'm actually going to hit Command Z or Control Z on the PC. You can do multiple undos. There's also a revision history here, that middle icon there, where I can undo my actions. And on some hosts, you can actually undo versions of the page. So that's another great feature is the mobile editing. And I like to come in and adjust the padding, the spacing around sections per devices. So another useful tip. Okay, the next thing is thinking about, as a marketer or a content creator, if I'm building a page, like say a sales page, a lot of groups are building pages quite frequently. If I'm not a designer or a coder, and I don't, or I really want to do my marketing. I don't want to spend my time building pages. Another feature that Elementor offers are templates. So there's the ability to build a template library. So if I were to go to the dashboard of WordPress, here's Elementor, but there's these templates, and I can actually create save templates over here. And what we would want to do as a team is create a modular set of almost like Lego bricks, so that if you need to spin up a new page, well, one option would be to copy all content from a page you like and paste it on your new one. But another is, let's say we were starting from scratch. You can click on this plus, and that will add a new section, but that's empty, right? Or you can click on this folder. And what that does is it's going to pull up, sometimes by default, it shows you these blocks that Elementor offers. So there are some out-of-the-box things that Elementor has put together. However, they may not match your styling, right? So you can see they have pages and things you could load in. But what we can do is build our own templates. So if I wanted, let's say I wanted another text and an image, I've actually saved that as a template. So I can just hit Insert. And then it's saying, do you want to apply the settings of this section to? I'm going to say no, I'll just go with the settings on my current page. But what it does is it drops it right in there. And what's neat is if this is already styled for desktop, tablet, and mobile, as a marketer, all I have to do is change the copy, maybe update it, upload a different image, and I'm good to go, right? So the idea is to build yourself a Lego brick library inside this folder icon where I can just come in and say, I want to insert a video here. And then it will drop it right in there. So if you build yourself enough Lego bricks as a content creator, you don't have to spend your time worrying if the site's going to look good. As long as you can get some decent graphic assets to put in, that's easy. I just click on the picture, click over here, and then I can choose to upload an image that's probably provided to me by a designer anyway. So the templating is very powerful in Elementor, especially for teams, right? And mentioning teams here, here's a newer feature. So if I go to the front end here, since I'm logged into WordPress, I'm seeing this administrator bar here. That can be turned off, and the public wouldn't see this. But there's a feature here called Notes. If I turn on Notes, what you'll notice is there's these little hotspots that have appeared. You see the number 1 there, the number 2. These are notes I clicked and left on the page. So you can see it's just me in here. So I actually commented at Chris from King Grizzly. It says, I'm leaving an Elementor note as a demonstration for a conference. Please ignore, right? And then I have one for myself. But I can click on that. I can reply. I can actually resolve the task. And it will know if I've seen it. I don't even know what these do. Oh, I can remark it as unread. This is really powerful for collaboration. So if you need to collaborate on a page, this notes feature, which is newer, a lot of people don't know about it. It'll accrue all the notes here in this list too. So you could log in and you can actually tag people, right? Like I tagged myself. So I got a notification in my email that there was a note for me. That is a really handy tool. And we've been experimenting with it for doing a lot of our like site revisions with clients inside of the site. It's quite interesting. I don't know if I would 100% do that versus say Google Docs or something, but this is handy at least inside of our own team. So let me see if I've hit, okay, I'm missing one thing here, which is Elementor Academy. If you want to learn, there is a nice website Elementor's put together, elementor.com/academy, and it's got a lot of great videos. So just to get better, well, YouTube has a ton of great content too, but Elementor does a good job of putting up a lot of learning resources. So I think for content creators, this is a great set of tips. If you can get the hang of these and get your team to invest in templates, that's going to go a long way towards making websites much more sustainable, fun to use, and more effective. So now let's talk about designers. And again, this can overlap to content creators and developers as well. So what do we have for designers? There's 3 elements I want to talk about. One is global styles. The second is widgets, and the third is something called kits. So let's get back into this. What I'm going to do this time is I have created, and actually let me exit out of this. I've created in the template library a page that I'm calling Web Style Guide. And I do recommend as a designer to set one of these up. So that would be, you go to the templates tab, go to save templates, you hit add new, and just add a page. It's not going to be public. We're not publishing it. But what I like to do is I've actually been working on this. This isn't quite a refined one, but like a style guide that goes right inside the site. So you can see I could turn on Navigator and you'll see I have the name of the sections. But really what it is, it gives me a centralized place to fiddle with my styles like colors, logos, typography, but it also is a value add for the client or the stakeholder, right? Because over time, if the style needs to be updated, we can do that here. And you can add as many sections or widgets as you want. So speaking of widgets, if I click on this icon here with the 9 boxes, Elementor comes with a lot of widgets out of the box that are, common user interface elements for modern websites. And they're all drag and drop friendly, right? If I need an icon, I can drag it on the page, and then I can adjust the settings, or I can upload my own icon. So out of the box, Elementor has a ton of useful widgets. But the first thing I really want to show is what I've found through trial and error as what I think is the best approach to handling global styles. So we'll look at colors, buttons, typography. And this is nice because it can flow, like if a lot of people are using Figma as a design program these days, but you could do this with any design program. You could create a similar template in your design program like Figma. And so you have like a one-to-one between this page and your design. And then you can have this workflow going from, say, Figma to Elementor and to your final build. But let's go ahead and take a look at updating the global site styles. So it's the hamburger icon on the top left. I hit site settings. And what this will pull up, and this is newer in the last few generations of Elementor, but now we have global colors, global fonts, typography, which we're going to look into this because this is confusing. What's the difference between fonts and typography? Buttons, images. So what are these things, right? If I click on global colors, you'll see I have the ability to name and set up swatches, and I can have as many as I want. Like I can add a new color here if I want, but I've just for this demonstration come up with this set. The first four are fixed. By default, they're named something like primary, secondary, I don't know, text and accent. I rename them. And so I like to have a brand color, what I call a secondary color, which is really just sort of like this. When I need like a soft background to sort of separate a section, I sometimes will use that secondary type color, then a text color, and what I'm calling an action color for things like links and buttons, and so on. And what's nice is I went ahead and I dropped an icon widget here on the page, and I just picked a circle icon. And then what I can do is I can assign these global colors to those icons. And I'll show you how I did that. Let me just hop back into the page. Okay, so I'm going to click on one of these. Like I said, this is just one of the icon widgets. If I go to style, you'll notice this globe is highlighted. What this means is that it's using a global value. So I could, for example, set this manually to whatever I want, right? But then that's local to just this particular widget. What I really want is a global color. So I'm going to say, no, I want this to be the brand color, because if I go change the brand color in the site settings, anywhere that is using the globe it's centralized. That style goes back. So if I change the brand color in my site settings, then everywhere in the site that's using the globe icon to tie to that color will update, right? So if I'm going to copy this color just in case. If I were to make that blue or purplish, you can see it's already changing on the page, which is really cool. Let me undo that. So that's Command Z. Okay, so there's colors, pretty intuitive, right? And if you think about it, if you had a 500-page site, that would be quite handy because you could update all 500 pages just by updating your colors. Now this is big. If you're setting up fonts in Elementor, I used to get so confused about this. There's a typography option and there's a global fonts one. And by default, global fonts, it would say something like, same thing, primary, secondary, I don't know, text and accent. And I didn't understand what they were about, so I would zero them out. I would come over to typography. And since typography has a body one, body tag, link, H1, all the way through H6, these are your headings. I would just click on these pencils and set these here, right? But then I realized a problem. And the problem is, if you do that, then if you have like an H2, but you wished it was sized like an H3, then for any place that happens in your website, you're going to have to go through and manually restyle that to try to match the styling of the other tag. But this method I'm going to show you now gets around that. So what we want to do is we want to tie these tags, H6 and so forth, to the global fonts, because then you're sort of you're basically just thinking in sizes and not HTML tags. So what I mean is set them up like this. So you have an extra large, which corresponds to your H1, an extra large. Then you have an XL for your H2, the text option, large, medium, and those go H4, H5, H6. And then I actually have some other ones that I noticed I'm commonly needing, like a label or an emphasis, like a little bit bigger font. Like I should probably set this text to emphasis here, a testimony. You can have as many as you want, but the trick is you come in here and you set the styling on the line height. And you can do that actually for a desktop. And if I switch to tablet and mobile, I can set those values. You want to do that for all of these. And then, whoops, I'm trying to open that tab back up again. Just a heads up, this is a little buggy. Sometimes it won't reflect your changes immediately and you have to update and refresh. Hopefully they sort that out. Or sometimes it will forget your typeface and you have to refresh the page. Now, if I go back to typography, what I do then is I use that globe to tie my H1 to the global H1 size. So if I go back to the page, let me show you why this is handy. I don't think I want to save my changes. Let's say we're doing a design on a page and we've got, oh, an H1. We want to mark up an H1. I'm going to duplicate this, right? Because for SEO, we really need it to be an H1, but for some reason that design, it's just, we don't need a big font. So what I can do, I can keep the H1 tag, but I can come over to my style and typography and I can just choose from one of the global ones. Say, look, I just want this to be like an H5. So this is powerful because now it's going to size like an H5, but it's marked up for SEO as an H1. Or, I could say, I want this to be styled like a label. So what's neat now is that same thing. We could have many, many pages, but as long as we're tying our styles back to those global styles, then updating the global styles will update the entire site. And for items like headings, like if I'm adding a text heading to the page like this, all I have to do, I don't even have to go click the global tag. I just choose, this is an H5. It will automatically grab that H5 style. I think that is maybe one of the better tips that is in this presentation because that has been a point of confusion for people. So I think as designers, the colors, I'll show you one more item. Just a few of the other settings available under site setting. You can set up your basics for things like buttons, right? So I have actually, I don't know if I have a button on this page. There we go. I can set up the basics for my button styles here, and I can always override those on each button with the button style setting. But it's nice to just go through these and set up some general preferences for things like buttons or form fields. It's really nice. You can even do the light box. And it is possible to stick in custom CSS as well right in here. So there's just a lot that can be done from this location as a designer and as a developer. I find Elementor to be really powerful. The last item we wanted to talk about were kits. Well, actually, hold on. Let's look at widgets briefly. I wanted to show you there are some really powerful widgets. So you'll notice as I'm scrolling this page, there's an animation happening. I just grabbed at random it's called a Lottie file. It looks like an animated vector graphic. If I click on that, that's actually a widget. So I got this file from a free website. I think it's called Lottie Files, but you can actually build them if you're savvy using something like After Effects. Now, if I click settings, I have control over, is that triggered on when someone clicks or when someone scrolls the page? I like to tie mine to the scroll. So as I'm scrolling up and down, the animation is going. I can choose when it starts. So like maybe I don't want it to start until I've scrolled 25% of the page. And there's some style options as well. I can control the width. I can control things like opacity. I can even use a CSS filter to change the color. Really neat widget. Another option here we have, here's another Lottie widget. You can see as I scroll the dots animate, but also I have the ability to absolutely position this. So if I go to positioning, I set it to absolute. And what this allows me to do is move it around on the page, sort of regardless of the context around it. So I'm able to actually move this by playing with those settings. Another neat widget that is in here that a designer might like is called the text path. I can actually design a path that my text will follow. I chose some of the default circle, but there's also things like arc, wave, or you can upload a custom one. So I've seen some pretty neat ones where people have very large text that sort of swoops across the page. And then on top of that, I went ahead and tapped into motion effects. So as the page is scrolled, I set it to rotate and scale. So it actually rotates and scales up. But there's other things. It can blur, it can drift vertically or horizontally. Quite powerful. You can come up with some really neat effects. You can also see right here, we've got a testimonial carousel. I may actually need to preview it in the page. Let me close notes here so you can see. I can manipulate that. It's also, each widget has its own settings, right? So there's these little tabs where I add the testimonials, but I can also control how many slides show each time, whether or not this thing auto plays, but quite a large library here. of widgets for a designer to have fun with, basically, including things like video widgets. I guess the last bit I want to mention before we go on to developers is if you look at this call to action, if I click on it, and if we look over here in the layers, it just says template. What does that mean? Well, what it means is I built a section and then I saved it. So I can right click any section and save it as a template, or I could go over to the template library and build it. But then what I did is I put in an empty section and there's a widget called the template widget. And I drag that onto the page and then it lets me choose a template from here. So I picked my call to action template. Here's why this is neat. I could put this on multiple pages, this section throughout the site. And let's say we have this call to action on 30 pages. I just need to go to the template, edit template, and make my update here for desktop, tablet, and mobile. And then that would be reflected throughout the site. So another great use of templates. Okay, that's probably good for content creators and for designers. Lastly, let's talk about developers. So for developers, uh, building a WordPress site in the past required installing or building what's called a theme. And that's become much easier now. In fact, you almost don't need any kind of fancy theme at all. So if we go to Appearance Themes, Elementor comes with a free theme called Hello Elementor. I've added something here called a child theme we can disregard. But if you just, when you set up WordPress, you can install this Hello theme. It's a very minimal, bare bones, lean theme. It doesn't, you don't need it to do much because the builder is so powerful. What's interesting is that you install this and you can set up a child theme if you're familiar with what that is. If you're not, don't worry about it. But then what we can do is we can go to Templates, Theme Builder, and we have the ability to build things we used to have to code, like the main nav, the footer, uh, post templates, right here using the visual builder, including other things like blog post archives. So for example, I can go to my main menu, I can edit it, and then I can just build it using the common Elementor widgets, right? So I have a logo. I can link that back to the home page. There's a navigation widget. I can fiddle with the styles on it. There's a button. I can actually change the markup if I want on that particular section. So I can build and style for desktop, and you can see that this hamburger is automatic on that widget for the menu. So I can set myself up, and you can see I hid the call to action button on mobile. So if I preview that, it actually hides. So all this is getting built, but you might be asking yourself, well, great, but how do I get it to display on certain pages? Well, there's this up arrow here, and I can set display conditions. So I'm saying display this on the entire site, but I could say, oh, exclude it from some particular page, right? Like I don't want it on my posts. So there's lots of conditions that could be set. So you could actually have multiple main sort of like header areas that you can control where they show up on the site, like on a landing page or not on a landing page. So I'm going to exit to my dashboard here. The templates all operate in a similar fashion. So the footer can be controlled like that. And then here's a neat thing is the single post template. So I can build a template that would display if somebody went to a blog post, right? So inside of WordPress, I can write articles, but this template is establishing how they would be styled when somebody views them. And you can see it's actually pulling dynamic content. So it's going to go get the post title. And this one here is going to get the post excerpt. And you can see under styles, I've set the global style to emphasis. And so I've got that bigger font. And I can just go through and there's these widgets that let me grab most of what I'm after. But also there is the ability, so let's say I don't have time in this demonstration, but if you're familiar with what a custom post type is, like let's say you had built a custom post type about a product, like a book, and there was a book description. Well, by default, I'm going to change this color to white. WordPress isn't going to know about a field called book description that you built using something like advanced custom fields. But if I go in the content area and I click on this dynamic tags icon, look at all these options of data I can go fetch. So what I would look for, which I don't have set up on this site, is advanced custom fields, and there would be a field called book description. I'd click on it and it would feed it in. And you can see there's lots of things I can already go after using these dynamic tags. So if you're a developer, your mind's probably going to good places. It's like, oh, wow, any field I can create, I can fetch here. Yes, and it can get even more powerful. You do have the ability to even do something like before and after. Um, so I'm probably going to struggle to give you a good example. But so let's say I was fetching the time and the date. I can click on that and I can customize many things about it. I could even just say, just get the year. But what if I wanted to put something before that, like copyright? You can feed in static information. So that there's some really nice aspects of this dynamic fetching. And then, again, we can style for different device sizes. I can update it and I can set the conditions on it. So for this one, display conditions, I'd want it to show on all my posts. But I could also limit it to a certain type of post, if I didn't want it showing on all posts. Okay, so we've talked about the hello theme. We talked about visual templates. Here's a trick I like to do. I have written some extra CSS. So by default, when you add a section to a page, it really doesn't have much padding. I have written some helper classes where I can control my padding on the top left, bottom, and right. Now, I've come up with my own naming conventions, which aren't great, but it's like section padding, top, and then it's a pixel value, like 200. Actually, it's a percentage base, but so 200%. Or I could do 25%, or I could do zero, or I could do top and bottom, zero, or I could do left and right, zero. I think. I can't remember all my conventions. Left, zero, something like that. The reason that's nice is because I've written my CSS in such a way that when I go to tablet and mobile, it will proportionately um, do the same thing, 25% or 200%. But what's nice is that you can still come in here and override the padding values. Now, the new version of Elementor sections called containers that are coming out soon, they're going to allow under the global site settings layout defaults for padding. So you can set the padding for desktop, tablet, mobile, but it still might be nice to write some helper classes, sort of like a bootstrap, which save you time. So you can see I did that here. I didn't want padding on the top of this section, so I just put section padding top 0. And so when I go down to tablet, that's already zeroed out. Saves me a lot of time. So as a developer, you may want to do something like that. Okay, let's look at our deck again. Am I missing anything? Theming, the helper class tip. Let's talk about extensibility. So what I mean by extensibility is really that Elementor is friendly to third-party add-ons. So it works great with a lot of plugins. And there are many plugins. I don't have any really turned on this site, but you can see I have some, like this lets me make custom skins for the blog post, which actually that's on Elementor's upcoming roadmap. There's one that allows for dynamic conditions, hiding and showing content depending on whether there's dynamic tags present. So it's very extensible. Elementor is friendly to third-party add-ons. There's also a WooCommerce builder. I forgot to mention that they support WooCommerce with some of their widgets. It makes it a little easier to set that up. But I wanted to really get into their roadmap. Um, so what's coming next? There's two items, Flexbox and custom loops. So I wanted you to see, close this. This is a website, playground.elementor.com/demo/flexbox. What this is showing us is what containers will look like. So instead of sections, we have containers. They're very comparable. However, they support Flexbox. And the Flexbox is a much more powerful layout option in CSS. Number one, this setup's going to write much cleaner code because Elementor in the past has had a lot of nested divs and sections. This will solve a lot of that. But then it supports Flexbox controls. And they actually have a whole tutorial here set up where it'll tell you what they want you to try to do. So you need to select that container. And then on this game, they want me to try to figure out how do I get these widgets to go left to right. So they give me instructions, but I happen to know with that one, I can change the direction from column to row. So there's some puzzles like that. You know, how do I get these items to go down to the bottom? So, you know, I might experiment. Oh, that didn't work. How about this? Oh, look, flex end. So you can see there's lots of controls. And what's neat is on on mobile, I can actually get the order. There's order controls, so I could reverse or reorder items. It just supports what Flexbox supports if you're familiar with that. So that's going to be great. That's almost stable. And so that's coming out soon. And the next would be custom loops, which I hinted at. All that custom loops are is they let you build custom skins for your lists of blog posts, so or list of whatever. So I had mentioned books. Like if you wanted a list of books where you have the book cover, author name, star rating, etc., you can build like a skin that can get applied to a list of posts. Currently, that's done with third-party plugins. There was one I had just mentioned here, Ella Custom Skin. That's pretty good. That allows me to do the same thing. Okay, finally for developers, it's very developer friendly. So Elementor has a pretty good developer library, but just some things. We're not going to get into these, but you can build your own widgets. There's comprehensive filter and action hooks. They expose instances of their objects. So for example, like with a carousel or a slider, you could change the arrows because they use I think it's Swiper.js library. They expose that so you could change it, put the controls anywhere on the page you want, change how the controls are represented, like an image or an icon. And then again, their documentation is pretty good. They have a Git repo or Git area where you can report bugs. They're a little bit slow about some of them, but it's not bad. So that is plenty. I'm going to start losing my voice, but there's one more thing. Now I've showed something for everyone, but here's just an interesting thing that I'm not sure where Elementor is going. I'm kind of wondering if they're going to try to become a standalone platform, sort of like Wix or one of their competitors in the future, Shopify type thing. So I don't know for sure what they're up to, but they did acquire a group called Stratic, and Stratic is a web host that takes a website and sort of pancakes it, flattens it, and then publishes it. And it makes it load way faster. It makes it load really secure. So I did a test. I built a few sites on Stratic before I knew Elementor was going to buy them as a test. And it really helps page speed. So I built this like shoe site here just for fun. So this is all built with Elementor and WordPress. You can see it has different pictures of these shoes, and you can learn about the shoes. Um, so, you know, fine. But here's what's interesting. If I run the page speed scores on it, I get a 97 on desktop in Google. This is without even, I don't even know if I'm running WP Rocket or any kind of caching. And I haven't optimized for something like accessibility, but I'm already getting 83 on mobile. If you're familiar with this, it's actually a good score. And on GT metrics, I'm getting an A, 98%. So interesting. I think that Stratic is going to optimize its platform to run Elementor like what like custom. So Elementor and Static eventually, hopefully, will work really great together. And so something to keep an eye on for the future. So that is plenty. If you have questions or comments, please let me know. Here's how to get a hold of me. Hopefully, you found something in there of value. And thank you for your attention.